Representative Jim Jordan grills FBI Director Christopher Wray over the censorship that his agency, the FBI, was involved in 2020. And it's not just the 2020 election. We know that the FBI was involved in massive amounts of censorship in many different domains, also sending emails, apparently on behalf of Ukrainian intelligence, also censoring people over the pandemic, people questioning what's happening in schools. It was way beyond just the election. And now that we have a ruling out of federal court, a judge has found that the government violated American civil rights, which are protected under the First Amendment, when the FBI was putting big pressure on big tech to silence people, to remove their political opinions off the platform. And so Christopher Wray showed up in Congress and actually took some questions. And one litany of questions came from Jim Jordan from Ohio, asking him about the ruling, about the censorship, and why his agency was involved in doing this in violation of the First Amendment and our rights.
8 days ago on July 4th in the Western District of Louisiana, the court found that the federal government suppressed Americans' First Amendment free speech rights. In his conclusion on page 154, the court said this, the judge said this: plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition. Opposition to COVID-19 vaccines, opposition to COVID-19 mask and lockdowns, opposition to the lab leak theory of COVID-19, opposition to the validity of the 2020 election, opposition to President Biden's policies, statements that the Hunter Biden laptop was true, and opposition to policies of the government officials in power. All were suppressed. It is quite telling that each example or category of suppressed speech was conservative in nature.
Interesting.
The court further writes, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth.
Yep.
Specific to the FBI, the court said this: the FBI's failure to alert social media companies that the Biden laptop story was real and not Russian disinformation is particularly troubling. The FBI had the laptop in their possession since December 2019 and had warned social media companies repeatedly to look out for, quote, hack and dump operation by the Russians prior to the 2020 election.
Persuading them.
Even after Facebook specifically asked whether the laptop story was Russian disinformation, the FBI refused to comment, resulting in social media companies' suppression of this story, and as a result, millions of our fellow citizens did not hear the story prior to the November 3rd, 2020 election.
Lying to us by omission.
Additionally, the FBI was included in industry meetings, bilateral meetings, received and forwarded alleged misinformation to social media companies, and actually misled companies in regard to the laptop story. When the court says the FBI misled, that's a nice way of saying they lied. They lied, and as a result, important information was kept from we the people days before the most important election we have, election of President of the United States, election of the Commander-in-Chief. In a survey last fall, 4 out of 5 Americans said they believe there's a two-tiered system of justice in America today.
4 out of 5.
They said that because there is.
Good numbers.
They said that because of what they've witnessed. Think about what Americans have seen. National School Board Association, left-wing political group, writes the White House and asks them to treat parents at school board meetings as terrorists. And the Garland Justice Department does just that. They put together a memo, set up a dedicated line of threat communication, a snitch line on parents. As a result, parents get investigated by our FBI, get a threat tag associated with their name, 25
threat
of them.
tag.
Because whistleblowers came and told us we're investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Americans have seen the FBI's Richmond field office put together a memorandum saying pro-life Catholics are extremists. They've seen 20 FBI agents, SWAT team members, show up at the home of Mark Houck and arrest him in front of his wife and 7 children, even though he had indicated he'd be happy to turn himself in. And what was he arrested for? Him and his 12-year-old son were praying outside an abortion facility. Some guy started screaming in his son's face, and he did what, frankly, any dad would do, defended his child. What's interesting is the National School Board Association apologized for the letter, but the Attorney General refuses to rescind his directive. The FBI did rescind, thank goodness, the Richmond Catholic Memorandum, but they refuse to tell Congress who wrote it and who approved it. And Mr. Houck, when he got his day in court, he was acquitted by a jury of his peers. American speech is censored, parents are called terrorists, Catholics are called radicals, and I haven't even talked about the spying that took place of a presidential campaign or the raiding of a former president's home. But maybe what's more frightening is what happens if you come forward and tell Congress you're a whistleblower, come tell the legislature, come tell the Congress what's going on. Look out. You will be retaliated against.
They'll prosecute you.
Ask Garrett O'Boyle. We told Congress about these issues. Took his clearance. They took his pay. They took his kids' clothes. Ask Gary Shapley, 14-year veteran at the IRS. Handled some of the biggest international tax fraud cases at the agency. He comes forward, and the Justice Department kicks him off the case. But here's what's truly unbelievable. Here's what's amazing. With all that history, with all that, the Justice Department, the FBI, want the taxpayers they censored, the parents they labeled, pro-life Catholics they called radical. They want them to pay for a new FBI headquarters. And they want FISA reauthorization of the 702 program in its current form.
No.
In the director's opening statement.
No, we don't want that.
You can't make this stuff up. There are 204,000 reasons why Republicans will oppose FISA reauthorization in its current form. 204,000 times the FBI improperly searched the 702 database.
We're going to get into that with Matt Gaetz,
too. Unlike the FBI censorship, in the court's opinion, that was focused on conservatives, the FBI's illegal scrutiny wasn't just limited to conservatives. BLM supporters were illegally scrutinized by the FBI as well. And I hope our Democrat friends will join us in opposing reauthorization of Section 702 the way it's currently done.
Doesn't matter what side it is.
And I hope they will work with us in the appropriations process to stop the weaponization of the government against the American people and end this double standard that exists now in our justice system.
So that's Jim Jordan, and he is getting us started as we hear from Christopher Wray talking about censorship. And I think this is a really big, important component to everything. And if you can't talk about stuff, then the FBI can insulate themselves and the power structure can remain immune from critique. And so they really want to make sure that they control the narrative. They don't like more and more people being able to shine the spotlight on exactly what they're doing. And so Representative Mike Johnson also weighed in on this. He's from Louisiana. He asked about stuff being removed literally by the FBI.
The evidence shows you, your agency, the people that directly report to you, suppressed conservative-leaning free speech about topics like the laptop, the lab leak theory of COVID-19's origin, the effectiveness of masks and COVID-19 lockdowns and vaccines, speech about election integrity in the 2020 presidential election, security of voting by mail, even parody about the president himself, negative posts about the economy. The FBI made the social media platforms pull that information off the internet if it came from conservative sources.
Protected political speech.
They did this under the guise that it was disinformation. Can you define what disinformation is?
Stuff we don't like.
What I can tell you is that our focus is not on disinformation, broadly speaking.
Well, wait a minute. Yes, it is. Wait a minute.
Can I answer the question?
You can in a minute. Your star witness said in the litigation, Elvis Chan, who's in charge of this, said
Chan.
they do it on the basis of disinformation. We need a definition of what that is.
Our focus is on malign foreign disinformation. That is foreign hostile actors who engage in covert efforts to
Mr. Wray.
Posting
our
memes
social
on
media
Twitter
platforms, which is something that is not seriously in dispute.
I have to stop you for time. That's not accurate. You need to read this court opinion because you're in charge of enforcing it. The court has found that, and Elvis Chan testified under oath in charge of this for you. He said 50%. He had a 50% success rate in having alleged election disinformation taken down or censored. That wasn't just foreign adversaries, sir. That was American citizens.
Yeah.
How do you answer for that?
Well, first off, I'm not sure that's a correct characterization.
Comes right out of the opinion. You should read it.
Of his testimony. But what I would say is the FBI is not in the business of moderating content.
You had a whole team in San
causing
Francisco.
Any social media company to suppress or censor.
That is not what the court has found.
What I would also say is among the things that you listed off, I find ironic the reference to the lab leak theory. The idea that the FBI would somehow be involved in suppressing references to the lab leak theory is somewhat absurd when you consider the fact that the FBI was the only
endorsed it,
the only agency in the entire intelligence community to reach the assessment that it was
came
more
from the
likely
lab.
than not that was the explanation
But
for the pandemic.
your agents pulled it off the internet, sir. That's what the evidence in the court has found.
It's unbelievable that Christopher Wray would just act like that is not something that's happening. It has been well documented, and a federal judge found it. And we've seen it in the Twitter files, and we have the emails literally from Elvis Chan and other people working at the FBI, fielding requests, sending requests out to the big tech companies to suppress them. It's like documented. So I don't know what he's even talking about, saying we're not in the business of doing it. You had an entire agent whose job this was to do that. So it's just about as dishonest as you can possibly get. Now, I don't imagine that they have a department of censoring conservatives at the FBI. Obviously, that's not something that's there. And so Christopher Wray takes their questions as though that's what they're asking. That's not what they're asking. They're asking about this in the context of the entire agency, the totality of what's happening. Are you censoring Americans' protected political speech? Yes, you are. Harriett Hageman, who beat that Liz Cheney out in Wyoming, also also asked Christopher Wray about the censorship topic.
You may know there is a preliminary injunction that's been entered.
Prior to the preliminary injunction, were these weekly meetings taking place?
I don't know if weekly meetings occurred, again, before the injunction, but certainly we've been very open about this, engaged with social media companies.
Does the FBI intend to continue to have such meetings leading up to the 2024 election to police election-related speech?
Well, we're not going to be policing.
Yes,
That's what you previously did.
That's not, I do not agree with that description.
Okay, well, here's what I would say. This committee has learned that the FBI acted to, quote, discredit leaked information about Hunter Biden before and after it was published, that, quote, Twitter's contact with the FBI was constant and pervasive as if it were a subsidiary, and that, quote, a surprisingly high number are requests by the FBI for Twitter to take action on election misinformation, even involving joke tweets from low follower accounts. Are you aware that that has been reported?
I am aware of some of what the committee has found in its report.
Okay.
But I will add that I'm not sure I agree with the findings.
But that's what we found. Director Wray, you and I both know that the federal government is forbidden from doing indirectly what it cannot do directly. In other words,
don't outsource
neither you
your
nor
censorship.
The FBI have any legal authority to circumvent the First Amendment by using a surrogate to do your dirty work. Yet that is exactly what you have been doing. The Bureau, under your watch, has been using proxies to violate the First Amendment. Were you the person who gave the orders to use these social media companies to violate Americans' First Amendment rights?
Again, I don't agree with your description of our engagement with social media companies.
So who made the decision to use social media companies as a proxy to suppress the First Amendment rights of American citizens?
Because I don't believe that's what we did, I'm not sure there's anyone that would have made such a decision.
Do you really expect the American public to believe that you were not involved in the decisions related to using social media companies to suppress the First Amendment rights of American citizens?
I can't help what people will believe or not. I can only speak to what the facts are.
Yeah, so who authorized it? Who said, yes, start pulling tweets down? Who gave the thumbs up? Yeah, who's assigned Elvis Chan to go and be this liaison between the social media companies? But he says, no, we're not suppressing speech. No, we're just getting rid of foreign malign influence threats, whatever he just happens to make up. So a nice session there. Now, we know that Jim Jordan is going to be working to do some things to stop the FBI from having the total control that they have now. One of the things he mentioned was FISA 702, and we'll see whether Congress does anything about it.